It was a tough day's work on Saturday for the Bears, who didn't really have much go their way at all against a solid Doncaster side in front of the OurLeague cameras. We've got all the reaction analysis from it. This is the world's greatest podcast about the Coventry Bears. This is Bear Necessities. Yes, welcome to Bear Necessities, your favourite podcast about the Coventry Bears. We live at covbearspodcast.com. We're at covbearspodcast on Twitter. You can find us in YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of those places, and we're sponsored by York's Tim. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dave Musson, and as always, joining me on the other side is former Bears fullback Craig Cathcart. Craig, how you doing?
Yes, I'm good, mate. I'm good. Disappointed after the weekend, but trying to take the positives from it and looking forward to the remainder of the season.
Yes, definitely. So, a few things to get into this show, our first show for a couple of weeks. First of all, I'm going to do the bad salesman thing and plug the book that I've written about the Bears' 20th anniversary season, which was last year. Regular listeners to the show will already know about this, and many of you have already ordered it, so thank you for that. But the book is a sort of season diary of last year, and it's being released in order to raise money for the Bears and for Rugby League Cares, so all profits will be split between those two. And there's only a couple more weeks left to pre-order. I'm going to close pre-orders on the 22nd of July, so head over to covbearspodcast.com/book to get your order in, and all being well, those books will be printed and ready for you to collect at the Keighley game in August, or for those of you who are listening from further away, then they will be popped in the post to you and you can read them and enjoy. So that's the plug over. Do buy the book if you can. It's helping raise money for a great cause. So coming up later on, we're going to chat to Bears matchday reporter Mike Hyde about his past as a Doncaster fan, and we'll briefly look ahead to this Saturday's trip to the capital to face the London Skolars. But to start, last Saturday, the final game at Broad Street, and a match that was streamed live on the OurLeague app, and as I said in the intro, sadly it didn't go the Bears' way at all, and they ended up losing 54-10 to Doncaster, with tries for the Bears coming from Elliot Hall again, and from Rhys Rance right at the end of the game. We'll dig into the match shortly, but first, here's the post-match thoughts of Bears head coach Tom Tsang.
So, Tom, it ended up being a bit of a one-sided scoreline in the end. I guess the Bears players tired near the end, but it was quite finely poised. Quite far into the first half, 10-6 with about 30 minutes gone, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was always going to be a tough game, considering the amount of injuries we already had coming into the game, and then the 6 or 7 lads away with England and Ireland in the student Four Nations, so our depth was stretched. We had 2 guys in on debut, and then we had to bring in 2 or 3 guys late from dual reg and loans. So the team was a little bit disjointed coming into the match in the first place, and then Cam Pierce-Paul goes down with a rib injury in the first 5 minutes of the game, which immediately forces a reshuffle. But we had our moments, we had our chances, especially in that first half an hour. The problem is we can't use any of those things really. I've mentioned them for context, but we can't really use them as excuses because they're things that are not in our control necessarily. We can only worry about and be concerned about things that are in our control, and that's what we do on the field and how we prepare for games. And I don't think we give ourselves any real chance of ultimately winning the game because we didn't have any sort of care for the ball. We pushed the pass too many times, and that's probably the sort of when you feel a little bit of pressure, you feel you're not quite sure what the man next to you is doing. You might force that, and I think that's what we did at half time. We'd only completed 50% of our sets, and we'd only had 13 sets in total in the first half, and only 10 in the second. So it just shows you how one-sided the game was. But that also tells you how hard the guys did actually work in defence, because considering we had such little ball, I'd probably say we had about 25% of the ball to only, in inverted commas, concede the tries that we did was fairly impressive actually. Especially when the field got opened up with the 2 red cards, and we'd been on the back end of things. So there's a lot of sort of things that we just really need to to work on, and it's only through hard work in the training field, and it's only through hard work when you're playing the games that things are going to turn the corner, and the lads know what they need to do. It's just now a case of putting that into practice.
Yeah, I guess, I'll talk a little bit about some of the turning points of the game, but there did appear on glance anyway to be a little bit of a lack of fluidity at times, especially going forward, and I guess that's probably down to the number of changes that you had to make, especially late on before the game.
Yeah, exactly. I've mentioned a few of the changes there, and we've got Nathan Conroy, who's an excellent player who's a hooker out and out almost, who's having to play in the halves for us, and he's doing a great job, and he's very passionate, and he's very good at communicating to the lads and getting them around the field, but it's not his first position. And then now he's trying to build a relationship with and a partnership with the players around him who are not used to his way of playing, and then that has a knock-on effect on the lines that people run and the timing and the tempo, and it all does have a knock-on effect. But like I said, that's why we train. That's why we work hard in those areas, is to try and minimise that. But anyone that's played any sport to any level knows that these things don't happen overnight, and they are difficult to improve quickly. And we're doing our best to do that, but it doesn't help. Also, today we've picked up another probably 6 injuries from that game. For the last half an hour in the second half, we didn't have any fit bodies on the bench. There's probably three players who finished the game who on another game wouldn't have done because of the injuries that they've got. So that makes it even more difficult and even more of a challenge. But we've never been. I've never been a person to shy away from a challenge. I know this club has never been one to shy away from a challenge. So we'll take it in our stride, and we'll look to improve things for next week.
And Tom, I think it's fair to say I'm never one to, talk about the officials or start talking about some of the decisions. But I think, I'll probably accept that Doncaster probably would have won the game today. But some of the decisions were very hard to take. I mean, the penalty count in the first half was, the Bears were far outweighed on the penalty count. The sending off decision, I think, I was right on pitch side. I could see it. It seemed a very strange decision that a Bears player got sent off for taking a punch. There was one or two other things that were missed. And, whilst it might not have affected the result, it certainly affected the nature of the result, as in I'm sure it would have been a much closer game without some of these decisions happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to comment too much on that. All I'll say is there was a lot of things that I didn't agree with, and there's a lot of things that I'll be asking the question of from the match official coaches at the RFL through the week, just for clarity, because the main thing is I need to be able to go back to my players and say this is why this decision was made, so that we can learn from it, and so that we can improve ourselves, and so that we have a better understanding of the way that the referees interpret things. Because at the moment there's a lot of head scratching, and so I just need to ask that question from the RFL and say why were these decisions given in this context and not in others, and hopefully we can take something out of it.
Yeah, because I think perhaps the sending off had the biggest impact on the game. I think had the Bears had 13 players on the field and Doncaster had 12, there was a glimmer of hope that the Bears would get back in the game, but it kind of killed the game, and as you say, with the number of injuries and everything else that the Bears had taken throughout the game, it meant that you were so short near the end, and Doncaster really just ran in a few tries at the end to make it a big result for them. Yeah,
I mean, it felt like everything that could go wrong did go wrong in that second half. And it was a case of sort of damage limitation for the most part in that second half, and just trying to limit the areas that were exposed purely down to like the space that's on the field created by the red card and also the injuries that we were having. Those guys there that just shouldn't have been on the field, but had to be because otherwise we'd have been down to probably sort of 9 or 10.
So I mean, let's move on and talk about next week. I guess you're going to have a few players back from the Student Four Nations. I mean, I think I admire the fact that you support the players that are going there, because obviously it has an impact on the team performance overall, but I guess you support those players going away and improving their game and everything else, and playing at a high level in a international game.
Yeah, I could never really take that opportunity away from players. I benefited from that opportunity when I was at university. I got a lot out of it on a personal level. Those guys, they've earned the right to represent their country, and there's not many sports people can say that they've represented their country legitimately and in an official competition. And it's not my place to take that opportunity away from them if they've earned it. The one thing that we do say is that we're allowing you to take that opportunity and make the most of that opportunity, so that we need that level, that repaying back to us when they return to us from those duties, that they return with renewed energy, with good enthusiasm, and they bring back to us and repay that faith in their own way when they come back to us. So that's kind of the trade-off. So, and when we saw it last year, the guys went away, they came back, and there was an extra bounce in their step, and that rubbed off on some of our guys, and hopefully that will happen this time as well, that those guys will come back into camp confident, because I know that England in particular have done pretty well, and be able to raise and lift some of the sort of the tired and injured bodies that we've got. But the other positive is the stuff that will happen today. Some of it was sort of just like freak coincidence in terms of the amount of injuries we got, but hopefully none of the injuries are too serious, and also the things that we needed to improve, for example some of the defensive things and some of the attacking things, they're easy fixes in terms of if we can just do the basics very well, then we'll always have a chance in games. And next week in particular is a very important match down at London. They just beat us when we played at home, and we were very, very disappointed losing that game. So hopefully we can get one back on them.
Yeah, so you'll hopefully have a full squad available there, and let's hope that we can go there and get the result.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thanks, Craig.
So thanks to Tom as always for joining us. Craig, I was watching this one on the OurLeague app because I wasn't able to make it in person. You were there at Broad Street, and it was a tough one on Saturday, really, wasn't it? The second half in particular really did run away from the Bears, especially after that double red card.
Yeah, firstly, though, I'll just sort of talk about what a nice day it was overall, though. Start with the positives, and then I'll go into the game.
Good.
I got up there early with a couple of mates, and there was a tag festival on, Tri-Tag Festival.
Mm-hmm.
There was teams from all over the country at that. Broad Street's a perfect venue for that sort of festival because there's so many pitches there. Lovely sunny day, watching some tag rugby, nursing a cold beer whilst doing so, and that was great. And then on to the game, and it was all fairly good in apart from conceding 2 early tries. The Bears looked to be in the game with about half an hour gone, but second half was, it was a tough watch, it has to be said. There's not many, I've watched over the years watching the Bears, I've watched some, fairly heavy defeats at times, but it felt a little bit, particularly from the sort of 60-minute mark onwards, like it was all one way. I know the Bears got the last try, and credit to the players for sticking with it. I think, again, and we have seen it a few times this season, the Bears on the half-hour marker in the game, and then they concede a couple of tries before half-time. Mm-hmm. Especially on a hot day like that, Doncaster would have been going in with their tails up and thinking they've done enough probably to win the game. There was a bit of a fight back at the start of the second half, but as you said, the double sending off really killed the game, and I think any fight that the Bears had left
Yeah, and it was a strange one, wasn't it? Because we saw last season Chris Vitellini, I remember, got sin-binned for being punched in the face 3 times, and that was odd at best. But took it up a level this week and got red carded for being punched in the face. That was quite something to see.
Yeah, I'm not one for yelling at the officials, but I must admit there was an outburst or two on Saturday. It was a very weak decision by the referee. He clearly didn't see what happened. And, pulling out the red card, you've got to be certain what's gone on. The touch judges would have seen the punches thrown. Apparently, from what I gather, the ref sent the Bears player off, sent Jack off for supposed retaliation. Now, anyone that's played the game, if you're getting punched in the face, what are you supposed to do? Say, carry on punching me? You're not going to do that. You're going to retaliate. That's the only thing you can do. So it was very unfortunate. It was. I don't know what went on in the tackle, what went on the floor, but at the end of the day, there's no excuse for someone lashing out and throwing punches on someone. And for the Bears player to get sent off as well was just pretty ridiculous.
I mean, based on from watching the sort of zoomed in replay on the OurLeague app, because they did show it looked like the two players just had words with each other after the tackle, and obviously the Doncaster player said something that Jack didn't agree with, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle there, and then it very quickly went from a little shove to punches being thrown by the Doncaster player, and that's purely based on what I saw with my eyes, not looking at it in any way biased towards the Bears' point of view. And then it all just went mad, and so many players crowded around that you couldn't see anything on the stream. But that's how it looked to me, and it definitely looked like it was probably a yellow card warranted for the Bears, and probably a red for the Doncaster player. But that's not how it went.
The silly thing is, it wasn't one of those games. It wasn't a particularly dirty game.
No.
There was very little aggro on the pitch between the two sets of players. It was one of those one-off things, and the ref, if you're a referee, you need to bear that in mind. I mean, I could have accepted probably yellow cards for both players. Even then, it would have been harsh on the Bears. I could have accepted a red for the Doncaster player and a yellow for the Bears. Or the ref could have, given a yellow to the Doncaster player and put it on report. But to send both off, I mean, how many times in a season do you see 2 players get sent off for something like that? I mean, but rarely ever. Sometimes, obviously, when there's punches thrown, a red comes out occasionally, but seemed a very strange decision, and it was a number of, it was a kind of a culmination of a number of decisions that really didn't go the Bears' way. There was a lot of frustration with the fans throughout the game, and as I said, I'm not one to bag the officials, but we kind of see it, to be honest, in League One. You see it all the time. You see the officials who, I have to be careful what I say here, but they check the penalty count throughout the game. They start being picky and award a couple of penalties late on in the half to the Bears to try and even things up a bit. But I think at one stage, in the first half, the penalty count was ridiculously one-sided, and it was in the second half as well. The Bears, surprisingly, in the last 10 minutes of the game, got a number of penalties given towards them. So, I don't see Tom. Tom's normally calm and collected as well. He wasn't very happy with the decision to send both players off, and the Bears coaching staff certainly, I'm sure, will put a report into the RFL about their views on what the situation was. I think, I said in the interview with Tom, I'm not sure it would have necessarily completely changed the outcome. I think Doncaster on the day, admittedly, were a better team. Both of their Papua New Guinean players were absolutely awesome. Jason Talley he's a guy, in my view, probably should be playing in Super League. they had a number of outstanding performances on the pitch and were the better team. But at that stage, had the Doncaster player, for example, got sent off and it was 13 against 12 for the Bears, with 25 minutes to go, it would have made it an interesting game, put it that way, especially in that heat. Doncaster might have tired a bit and the Bears might have had their tails up and seen an opportunity. But it's all what ifs now. I think at the end of the day, probably with the Bears having the number of players missing that they did, both through injury and the student internationals who were away at the Student Four Nations, I think they just didn't have quite the same level of fluidity as we've seen sometimes this season. Defensively, they weren't quite at it as they have been in some games that we've seen this year. And saying that, there was some good individual performances. Chris Barrett again leading from the front. Kieran Sherritt again was, as he always is, pretty awesome. Joe Sanderson, who came in at half back, he looked decent. He's got a big hole to fill with Nick Newman going to Newcastle, but thought he played very well for his first game. Nathan Conroy's filling a gap there, and I thought he played well. Hayden Freeman made a couple of great runs throughout the game. There was some good individual performances. Harry Kaufman, I thought, put his body on the line all the way throughout the game,
as he always does.
As he always does. I think it's difficult for him though, because he doesn't normally play a full match. He normally does anywhere sort of between 20 and 40 minutes. So you could see certainly he was struggling a little bit in the towards the end of the first half and in the heat as well. It would have been a very tricky day, but he gave 100% and played very, very well.
Yeah, it's just one of those that the Bears just have to chalk off as done and leave behind them now. And as Tom said in your post-match interview, there are a number of things that went wrong on Saturday that, in theory, should be fairly quick fixes, in terms of get on the training pitch and work out a few things. And we've got those players coming back from the Student Four Nations who will hopefully have a bit of a spring in their step and can kick on into the second half of the season. So, yeah, I mean, if people are desperate to see the game, obviously they can go onto the Betfred Facebook page, and I think the archive video of it will be on there as well, so you can watch back if you really want to. And it was a shame that the one time that the live streaming cameras were coming to the Bears, it was such a difficult afternoon in terms of so many players being missing. But hey ho, that's how these things go, and fingers crossed that when the Bears are next on the OurLeague app, they'll have a full strength team to pick from. They can put on a bit more of a realistic showing of what we know the team can offer. Before we,
I'm just going to say, I mean, I have to say again, the OurLeague coverage was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it really was.
I mean, the number of games that you get on there, and the quality of the commentary and the coverage is top notch, and it's all free. So I have to say the RFL take a lot of criticism, but the OurLeague app is certainly one of the best innovations in sport at the moment. There's not many other sports where you can download an app for free and get the amount of content that you get on the OurLeague app. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it really is.
I'd urge anyone to download it because if you're a fan of rugby league, then it's certainly the best thing out there in rugby league at the moment.
Yes, backed, definitely. So before we move away from talking about the Bears and Doncaster in the same breath, there is an interesting link between those two clubs. So apart from being in the same division, that other link is our volunteer matchday reporter Mike Hyde, who is from Doncaster, and his first rugby league love was Doncaster, in fact. And long-term listeners might remember us talking to him on the show last year, where he talked about how he got into rugby league, and he did mention his time as a Doncaster fan. Now, Craig, you caught up with him on Saturday before the match to sort of chat about his divided loyalties. It's a really great interview, and we're going to play it right now.
So I've got Mike Hyde from Coventry Bears media team here to talk to me. So, Mike, I think we've maybe discussed it before on the podcast, but you used to be a Doncaster fan. You went through a lot of dark days supporting Doncaster back in the day at Tattersfield, and now you're a thorough Coventry Bears fan. So do you still, we're just after the game today where Doncaster have run out probably easy winners, but are you now a Bears fan through and through?
I think I have to say yes to that. Once upon a time, the thought of seeing the Dons win away from home was the stuff of fantasies. I would have given anything for a day like that. Yeah, but that was 30 years ago. And, 30, 40 years ago, I'm telling my age now, if somebody asked me, I was like a stick of rock with Doncaster written all the way through. That could be Doncaster Rugby League or Doncaster Rovers for that matter. Now that's faded a little bit, I think if you were to cut me in half now, you might see Bears written there.
So you've supported Doncaster through the tough times, and now you support the Bears. So probably fair to say that you're not a glory supporter then.
I think masochist is perhaps one definition for me, or perverted or something like that. I mean, when I used to watch the Dons in the bad days, it's very difficult to ask how bad can be. But if you imagine a derelict stadium, partially vandalised, crumbling terraces, 98 people there, miserable as sin, watching a massive defeat in the pouring rain or snow, and then doing the same again the week after. And the week after that, just relentlessly bad. See that documentary. Just search out Another Bloody Sunday. It's now freely available on the Yorkshire Film Archive. So search out Another Bloody Sunday, and that just shows you how bad it was. So anything that the Coventry Bears now do for me is actually pretty good. Whether it's playing here, playing at the Butts, which I used to love and we'll be going back to hopefully soon. With 400 people there, that's the stuff of dreams.
Yeah. So, I've actually recently watched Another Bloody Sunday, and I believe that you were actually on the show. I didn't spot you though.
I was thinner.
Yeah.
I was a little bit thinner. As it pans around, I'm stood there, and the reason why you perhaps didn't see me is I stood on my own. And the reason I was on my own was because none of my mates would ever go with me. Doncaster was always a football town, and when I say a football town, not necessarily Doncaster Rovers, kids my age or, people in their teens and 20s, they used to watch Sheffield United or Sheffield Wednesday or Leeds. Rugby League was so far down the conscious, of the town. But then things came good. Things came really, really good. Ironically, it was by the time I got to the Midlands, and there's more a case of me watching them from afar or just seeing the odd game. And that's what I cling on to, because some absolutely awful 98 people in the ground, having a documentary made about you because you are so bad. Somehow, and perhaps there's a moral in this story, they got themselves promoted into, it wasn't actually Super League. It was like a proto-Super League. It was League One, but they called it the Big League. And they got themselves promoted into it. And we knew they'd probably come straight back down again. But they won their first match, to everybody's disbelief. Then they won their second match. And then for just like a brief 5 days, the Dons were the very top of Rugby League in the country. I was so proud. And then we were facing Leeds at home, the mighty Leeds. 98 people I was in the crowd of. I said that 3 times now. But then I was in the crowd of 6,200 at Tattersfield when we took on Leeds. Yeah, we lost, and we lost every game that season afterwards. And the club very nearly went bankrupt. But I'd seen the very lowest and I'd seen the very highest. But I think, again, from that very high point of 6,000 crowd against Leeds to near as damn it. Well, they actually went into liquidation that season. It ended, and there was rumours and plans to merge with Sheffield, which obviously nobody wanted. Somehow the Dons, the spirit, the never say die spirit of the Dons, they resurrected themselves and found themselves a greyhound stadium to play in at a place called Stainforth, which makes anywhere the Bears play it seem positively glamorous. So they played in this greyhound stadium, and they've been building ever since then. Funnily enough, what people in Doncaster always used to say, wouldn't it make sense if the Rovers and the Dons got together? Then you've got 2 teams, neither of which are doing that well. You've got one town. why do you need 2 or 3 stadiums or whatever? So that's sort of like where the Dons are now, and I see that as a real solid future because they're now part of the Dons. The Dons are now part of this Team Doncaster thing. So this multi-sport thing with the women's football and basketball and the gym and quite a lot of other things coalescing around that. Bit like Barcelona, but in a more South Yorkshire sort of way. Yeah.
I mean, having watched the documentary, I think the thing that stands out to me is back in those days, I mean, those players were on very little money. Most of them were all part-time players. The commitment shown was unbelievable, and the tackles were ferocious. Players coming off with their teeth knocked out. The other thing to say as well is that there was real passion in the sport, and it just shows that no matter how bad things get, if the passion's there and people want to make it work, it will work. Because you look at Doncaster today, and it's a club that's potentially on the up, that has real potential. But what was it like watching rugby in those days compared to today? I mean, there is still some big hits going in. I mean, you saw today some ferocious hits, but back in those days it was really, especially on a muddy pitch where you can hardly run.
Yeah, I think there's several things which were so different then. I mean, it was, a really rough, tough, harsh sport, and the guys who played, they were not like students and office workers. These were guys who'd be giving it everything down the pit, and then this was their form of release. And then, yes, it was aggressive, yes, it was hard, and yes, sometimes it was a bit dirty. But the overwhelming memory for me is the mud, and just there's a very different sort of spectacle. It was spectacular, but in almost like a slow motion sort of way. And yeah, some of the injuries that you saw. And I'll tell you one thing, I used to watch the Dons, as was clearly said, and I used to watch them away from home as well. And I could have gone on the team bus as a supporter, like Bear supporters. Yeah. But I was absolutely terrified of doing that in case I was dragged out to play. Because that again, though, they struggled sometimes to get a team away from home, and it was not unknown for supporters to turn out. By Christ, I'd have been flattened. I mean, the game that we play now is faster. It's more civilised. It's still hard. But it's a fast, skillful game. Not beer belly forwards who play 20 stone, just knocking hell out of each other. It's a very, very different. I mean, it's a modern game now. It's a modern game. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's all fascinating to me. I mean, I think looking at the Bears and where we are now and where we're likely to be, the Bears and Doncaster today, obviously Doncaster came out on top, but I think the Bears are getting there, certainly, and I'm sure you can see that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I write match reports for the Bears, and I report in Rugby League Weekly, and the bizarre thing is, I can talk today about a Coventry side which is committed to development, so committed to development that 8 players are missing on student international duty. Yeah. Like 8 players on international duty. We're not talking about Wigan, we're not talking about Widnes or Hull KR, we're talking about Coventry having 8 players missing on international duty at student level, which, hang on, these are guys 18, 19, 20, 21. This is really good. If we could keep some of this going, another 3 years, another 4 years, who knows where we're going to be.
We're getting more and more competitive every year on the pitch. You look at results this year, and there's been so many close games and some big wins against Heartland teams as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be honest, breaking that duck and getting that first proper win against the Heartland team. Now, there's still a few little taboos to break, if you like. To my knowledge, thinking back, we haven't won against a Heartland team away from home. By definition, we've never done a double over a Heartland team. So these are next year's landmarks for me now. Yeah. It'd be lovely to sneak it in this year. But to beat a Heartland team now is not a massive, major event. It's something that we can and will do. And that is now the difference. We're not the little no-hopers at the bottom in a mini-league of our own with 2 other hopeless teams. That's progress.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I do really appreciate the chat, and as I said, that it's got to be one of the best sporting documentaries ever. Another Bloody Sunday. It's free to watch. Search it on Google. Definitely have a look at it. It harks back to the good old days where people played sport because they loved it, and that was it. But yeah, thank you very much.
Pleasure, yeah.
So thanks to Mike for joining us on the show again, and Craig, really great job interviewing him there, and it's always good. Mike's always a good person for a story. He's got a lot of history in rugby league, both up in Doncaster and in the Midlands, so great to hear him talking about his divided loyalties, and there's always going to be that link there between the Bears and Doncaster. So it's going to be interesting when the day comes when the Bears finally beat Doncaster. We'll have to get him back on the show and see how he feels about that. But we're just about done for this episode, but not before we look ahead to this weekend. So the next match for Bears down to London at the weekend to face the Skolars, and it's a fixture that the Bears won on this very weekend last season, and it kind of kick-started a 4-match winning streak. I mean, Craig, we've got players coming back, hopefully something closer to resembling a full-strength team. There's revenge on the cards because of how the Skolars somehow managed to scramble away from Coventry with a win back at Easter. What are you thinking about this one?
You just reminded me of that devastating loss against them. But yeah, I think there's very little between the two sides. Skolars have been on a good run this season, of which the win late on against the Bears was part of that run, and it propelled them right up the table. They've fallen back a little bit in the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks. I think they've won 1 out of 4 games, something like that, or 1 out of 3. But they are a very decent side. They really they've got players who can score from anywhere. They've got players who they've got a big pack. They're very difficult to play against. But as I said, there is very little between the two sides, and we saw that at the home game. Bears will be back hopefully to near full strength. I think there's still a few long-term injuries missing, but it's going to be a tight one. I think it'll be 1 score again in it, and this time for the Bears, hopefully.
Yeah, same here. I can't help but feel like it's going to be a tight game. And this fixture last year, the Bears were 14-0 down at one stage and managed to come back and get the win. So, I'm feeling like we're definitely due a Bears win, and we're better placed to do it than down in the capital. And actually, if you look at July as a whole, there's 3 games for the Bears: Skolars away, and then I think Hunslet at home and West Wales away. Now, those are all fixtures that the Bears won last season, and we've been saying all along that we feel the Bears have potentially got a better team this time around than they did last season, and they've certainly got a more stable team if everyone's fit and firing. So there's real potential here for this weekend's game to have the same effect as last year and kickstart a bit of a run. And there's no reason why the Bears can't win 3 out of 3 in this month, and that would really transform their season, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a crucial game, to be honest. They are on a bit of a bad run. Within that run, there's been a number of good performances which just haven't led to a win. And I think one thing from Saturday is maybe the confidence that they had a couple of months ago is just not quite there at the moment. And a win would really kickstart that. I mean, confidence is in this division. Confidence is absolutely everything, because whilst there is teams who are on much bigger budgets than the Bears, but there is actually nothing much between most of the teams. A run of results will propel you up the table, and playing with confidence will get you the results that you need. And I think you're right. I think the next month is a fairly crucial time. I mean, if the Bears can get a few wins, then again, as I said, they'll be pushing up towards that 6th spot, which, I'm still hopeful of the Bears getting into that 6th spot. But I think it's Crusaders have had a couple of good results lately. They're moving up the table now, and I'm hoping the Bears can do the same thing.
Yes, likewise. Well, we'll all be watching very closely, whether in the ground or on Twitter this weekend, and of course we'll be back on the podcast to review it all next week. And I think at the time of recording, there are still spots available for any Bears fans who want to travel down and watch the game in person. Check out the Bears official social media feeds and the Supporters Club feeds for more details on that. And of course, don't forget, buy the book, not just for me, but to raise money for charity. covbearspodcast.com/book. If you haven't placed your order already, do try and do so before the 22nd of July so I can get those orders in. And of course, subscribe to a podcast, tell a friend, but most of all, send loads of positive vibes to the Bears, back the team. It's going to happen. They're going to turn it around. And let's keep our fingers crossed that just like last season, July is the turning point for this Bears season, and we can really kick on into the second half. But thanks as always for listening, and Craig, thanks again to you for joining me as ever, and I'll chat to you next week.
Yes, thanks, mate. Cheers.